One of the challenging aspects of doing human-related research is finding participants, and particularly the right participants. Unless you have a good sample of participants, your research may well be worthless. I've known many people and large institutions to put a survey on a website and invite as many people to answer as look at it. But what they have is a self-selected sample. Those people who happen to find that website, who happen to be interested in the topic. The results are close to worthless, because those who did not answer probably think very differently from those who chose to answer. There are three major types of sampling. Census is one in which everyone is asked to respond. This is the best method, as everyone is included, no one is excluded. The second type of sampling is the random sample, where participants are chosen randomly from a list of all participants. Random sampling is not simply advertising a survey and accepting whoever responds to it. Random sampling is when the researcher takes the trouble to actually randomly select people from a list of all the possible participants. In the past, researchers commonly used electoral rolls for samples of the Australian population. Privacy legislation has meant that the electoral rolls can no longer be used for that process, except for health research. But there are some other ways of doing it. You can buy questions in omnibus surveys, surveys which welcome people's contributions. Again, there's a significant cost. It's about $1,000 per question to put questions in the Australian Survey of Social Attitudes, for example. I wanted to study Uniting Church members and their experiences of Christian education. And there's certainly no list available of all the Uniting Church members. So a random survey of Uniting Church members was not possible. But it was possible to obtain a list of all Uniting Churches, and I could randomly select from there, and then ask within each of those churches for everyone to respond. But because the unit of randomization was churches and not individuals, I actually needed a very large sample. I aimed at getting 400 churches to participate in that survey. 1,100 people in a survey gives you an error rate of 3%. That means that you can be 95% confident that the true figure in the whole population is between 3% either way of the actual figure you get. If you have a sample of 400, then you've got a 5% error rate. A similar number of participants is required for Pentecostals in Australia, as it is for Australian adults, as it is for the whole American population. That's how the statistics work. It's not a percentage of the actual population until you get to very small groups of people. But remember that the number that's required is based on the sampling frame. Thus, if you're sampling churches to get church attenders, you'd ideally need 1,100 churches, even if you get 5,000 attenders from one particular church. And again, remember that you need to do the random sampling, and you can do it through a program that chooses randomly the numbers from however many churches there are, or you can use a random number table and you choose the numbers based on that table. The final type of sampling is a purposive sample, where you work out all the relevant demographic factors that may have an impact on your topic and look for people who vary across those factors. And this is the most common way of doing sampling for qualitative research, where you're not looking at large numbers. What you need is representation of the diversity of contexts, which may have some influence, some bearing on what you want to study. Hence, you need sufficient interviews to ensure that you've covered that diversity. Some projects require great depth in interviews, perhaps, and you will need to do fewer interviews, but usually it's better to do more interviews with a little less depth to ensure that you have indeed covered the variety of contexts and the variety of situations from which you might get different stories. So you can calculate the numbers of interviews that you need by drawing up a table. And that table will include each of some of the factors. For example, you may be looking at the factors influencing youth culture. Obviously, the gender will be one factor. You'll want to look at males and females, people of different age levels within youth, for example. You may want to be looking at education levels, those with high levels of formal education and those with lower levels. Ethnic background may be very significant for you. Religious background could be significant. And then what about those living in remote rural areas, for example, or a rural town, large town, suburban, inner city? You draw up your table in such a way as to ensure that you cover at least a few people, ideally 2 or 3 people, in each of the cells of that multi-dimensional table. So how do you actually find people to participate in your research? It's tempting to go to your own friends and contacts, but they will not necessarily be representative of the wider public. They may also tell you what you want to hear, and it's unethical to go to people who are in any way dependent on you. You're certainly not allowed to go to your own students or your own congregational members in a church. Go to organisations where those people are and seek permission from those organisations to advertise your study. That's usually the best way of doing it. If you interview people, you can ask those people you've interviewed to contact others who might be willing to also talk to you. You can't ask them directly for contact details. The old snowballing method is now illegal. But you can ask people to contact others for you and then invite those people to contact you for research. Sometimes it's really helpful to have a little leaflet about the research that you're doing that you can then give to people and they can pass on to others. And on that leaflet will be your contact details. You will never find the perfect sample. Not even the Australian Bureau of Statistics has the perfect sample. You have to use the data that you can get. But you do need to think carefully through the limitations of the sample that you achieve. and note those limitations in your thesis or in your article. And be thankful for all those who were willing to contribute to your research.